Good morning. This is Barbara Dooley. Welcome. If you have filled up your gas tank lately, you know just how expensive gasoline has become. We're at the mercy of the Middle East, and it doesn't seem that we're making much progress to wean ourselves from their whims of pricing. Well, this morning, my guest is Craig Shields, a business consultant and author of Renewable Energy, Facts and Fantasies. And I've asked him to join us to talk about renewable energy and just what it would mean to us here in the United States. Good morning, Craig.
Hi there, Barbara.
All right, we have all heard and read about renewable energy, but I'm not sure that we all know both sides of the equation. What exactly are you talking about when you say renewable energy?
Well, there are a whole bunch of sources of energy that never run out, and they're essentially derived from the sun. So in other words, the sun will be shining long after we're gone. And in fact, the sun radiates the earth with 6,000 times more energy every day than all 7 billion of us consume. So all we're looking for is a solution that captures 1/6,000, 1/6,000th, I guess you could say, of the sun's energy, whether that's solar panels on roofs, or whether that's wind, because obviously it's the sun that causes the wind to blow. And there are various other forms of renewable energy, which simply mean that they never run out, unlike oil.
Well, I understand that, and we understand that, but here's what I don't understand. With all the advances that we have had in our world in the last century, this has been something that nobody seems to be able to solve.
Well, I'm not sure that nobody's able to solve it. The issue really is cost. In other words, right now, if you want clean energy, you want to completely replace all our dependence on coal and oil with, say, solar or wind or geothermal or any of the other flavors of renewables, it's a little bit expensive. The price is falling all the time, and we're actually very close to what is referred to as grid parity. In other words, the point at which there will be an equivalence in cost between a kilowatt hour of electricity generated by coal and that by wind. But we're not quite there yet. So the issue really is cost, and the other issue is politics, because there are 30 states in the United States that have some level of coal. So there's 60 senators out of 100 who are completely unwilling to make coal go away, even though it's killing us, even though there are people dropping dead. We spend $250 billion a year dealing with the health care, the lung disease that's caused directly from breathing this garbage. So there's a huge imperative. You mentioned the cost of gasoline and the issue of terrorist regimes and all the other incredible stupidity that we fund every day with this our addiction to oil. But there are all of these things, fossil fuels in all their forms, not to mention nuclear. I mean, we have no solution for nuclear waste, but we still seem hell-bent on building nuclear reactors. So it's a nutty world out there.
It is a nutty world, but here's what I don't understand. I have heard, I don't know how factual this is, but that we have 400 years of oil for the people in the United States in Alaska, but we won't drill there.
Well, there are all the time rumors of enormous amounts of oil someplace, and certainly the tar sands of northern Alberta you hear about and so forth. The truth is we're running out of oil. We have achieved what is referred to as peak oil. You'll notice that the oil production is declining worldwide every day, and it's simply because we're running out of it. It's not that we'll ever run out of the last drop. It's just that we've run out of inexpensive oil. Now it's getting expensive. And obviously, as I point out, it's expensive in more ways than one. In other words, there are There are environmental issues, there are health care issues, there are national security issues. I know there are people who don't believe in global warming, but are there people who don't believe in terrorism or cancer? So, there are lots of really good reasons. And by the way, let me just remind your readers that the website, 2 Green Energy, the number 2greenenergy.com, has tons and tons of free material on this subject. So I would urge people to learn more about it there.
Well, we're going to post your website on our website so that people can go right to you and see what you're talking about. But let's talk about which clean energy technologies are ready for use right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the United States, we have less than 2% penetration of renewables. In other words, we have 98%, 49% is coal. Then we've got hydroelectric dams largely. We've got, nuclear and so forth. About 2% of it is wind and solar in the form of photovoltaics, in other words, solar panels.
Right.
So these things are, whether you want to build more of them for utilities, or certainly we all are at liberty to put solar panels on our roofs of our homes and our office buildings and so forth. So those technologies, there are actually many of these things that are ready for use. So the real question, as I say, is both economic and political. So corn ethanol is an example. About a third of the corn that's grown in the United States goes to ethanol. So you've got a problem there, obviously, with the food supply and the price of food and so forth. So all of this becomes, yet we still do it. We're still all about corn ethanol because of the powerful senators in the Corn Belt.
But now think about this. Think about all the farms that the federal government pay not to plant. Mm-hmm. Couldn't they be growing corn?
Well, I suppose. But the issue with growing corn, and I'm not an expert in corn ethanol, but I can tell you this. The issue with corn is one of them, it's not, by the time you plant it, you irrigate it, you handle the runoff of the chemical fertilizers you have to dump on it and try to get them from polluting the rivers. And then you transport and you refine and distribute the ethanol. You've got a mess. You don't have any net gain in terms of environmental safety and friendliness.
Well, you're not telling me that there's any way that with renewable energy that we would indeed save money.
Well, over the long term, we certainly will. So, in other words, what makes this so interesting, Barbara, is that this is changing every minute. In the few minutes we're having this conversation, there are hundreds of thousands of people hard at work in improving the efficiency and driving down the cost of these renewable solutions all over the world. So it's a very interesting calculus. The whole thing about biomass. So we've got, in addition to corn, we've got algae, we've got switchgrass, we've got all manner of energy stored in the carbon bonds that are in our organic molecules. So there are people all over the place trying to figure out what's the best way of creating fuels that can create energy, create electricity, and liquid fuels for our cars and trucks.
Well, may I say that here in the South, y'all need to be thinking about kudzu. Mm-hmm. I think you could probably get a lot of energy from kudzu.
Yes, and there are tons of people talking about that and working on that as well.
Absolutely. Well, what are some of the fantasies that you talk about?
Well, it depends on what you call a fantasy. I happen to believe in cold fusion, and I know that puts me in the slim minority.
Okay, what is cold fusion?
Well, you know what fusion is, right? So in other words, on the surface of the sun and in hydrogen bombs, you have hydrogen atoms smashing together to form helium, and the slight reduction in mass that happens during that process turns into an enormous amount of energy. Now, that's fine if you want to blow up a country or whatever. I'm not in favor of this, obviously, but I'm just saying, hot fusion, what we think of intellectually when we think of fusion, happens in a very, very short period of time at an enormously high temperature. Now, there have been experiments that have shown that this can happen over a slightly longer period of time at a much lower temperature and can be managed, and that's referred to as cold fusion. Now, this is an extremely controversial subject because some of the people who've tried to replicate these experiments of low-energy nuclear reactions have been unsuccessful, and they've alleged that this whole thing was made up in the first place. Personally, and again, I'm not an expert. I'm only as good as the people I've interviewed on this thing. But readers will notice in the book, Renewable Energy Facts and Fantasies, that there's a chapter in which I've interviewed one of the senior people from Caltech, and I'm convinced that this is real. As a matter of fact, it was a very interesting discussion. I was in his office for some other reason, and he whispered to me, he goes, "Craig, cold fusion, it's real." And I go, "Really? I want to come back and interview you on this thing." It says, the whole thing is so fantastically improbable. In other words, all of the physics that goes into this is interesting, but the people and the struggle and the intrigue and the backstabbing and so forth makes this thing a really fantastically, just a fascinating subject to me.
It is a fascinating subject, but it's also a subject that most of us, and I'm probably number one, I can't really understand it all. I think it's such a scientific thing that you have to almost have a mind for that because the average person just doesn't get it.
Well, I guess I have a chapter, by the way. The appendix of the book is a chapter on all the physics that almost anybody needs to know, and it's only a few pages long. To be honest with you, some of this stuff really is difficult. The organic chemistry that goes into all this. Right, but most of it isn't. Most of it's not that tough. When you just imagine, as I said, that the sun gives us 6,000 times more energy every day than we need. So all you're really looking for are ways of capturing, harvesting, and using that energy. And there are several different ways, but that's, just imagine the sun heats the earth in different, in discriminating ways. It heats some areas hotter than others. So that causes the wind to blow. So that's energy. That fluid wind whipping across the plains is energy. And that can be harvested in the form of a mechanical turbine spinning around. So, and that mechanical energy can be translated into electrical energy, which, powers your toaster or your car. I mean, there are a couple chapters there on electric vehicles. So,
well, Craig, I want to thank you for being with me this morning, and we all look forward to the future when we have this renewable energy and we don't have to be at the Middle East whims and their wars. And for those of you that want more information, go to our website, www.1340wgau.com, and we will put you into his website. Thanks, Craig.
You bet, Barbara. Thanks for having me on the show.
Okay, and this is Barbara Dooley on News Talk, 1340 WGAU.